cameras on. We would love to see your faces, and the panel would love to see your faces throughout the session as well. So please keep your cameras on as we go through today's session. We'd also love for you to stay on mute for today's session, because today's largely about hearing from the experience of the panel, and it's going to be an amazing one. But we also want to invite you into the conversation, and we're going to do that two ways. We're going to invite you into the conversation through the chat, but we're also going to invite you into the conversation through some live polling. So if you can, if you want to get your mobile ready for that, so when we bring up live polling, we will access that via a QR code. But of course, if you don't have your phone with you, that's fine. We'll continue to use the chat so your voice is included. So I think we have a number of people now in. Are you still letting people in from the waiting room? Yes, I might keep us going anyway, just because we have a lot to get through today. And so I would like to begin today's session with an acknowledgement of country. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we live and work. I recognise their continuing connection to land, water and community, and I pay respect to elders past, present and emerging. Now we have an amazing session today with 4 amazing panellists. Today with us is Sally Capp, Lord Mayor of Melbourne. We also have Karen Hayes, who, they'll all be introducing themselves in a moment, but we also have Karen Hayes, who's the CEO of Guide Dog Victoria. We have Cheryl Battergall, who is the chair of WasTech Engineering, and of course, Fabienne Datner, who is the CEO and founder of Datner Grant and also of Homeward Bound. Now, I think many of us are actually very familiar with their accomplishments and the way that they've contributed to the way that we live. And so I'd actually like to say a big personal thank you for the contributions that you've made to our lives and our society. But I know many of us are really, really keen to hear about your experiences. And so I thought we might kick off today's session by hearing about your individual pathways to leadership. And I'm going to hear from all 4 of you, and so just a little bit of a story, because I know your stories are huge, and just sharing with us a bit of your pathway to leadership. And I might just randomly pick to bring you into the conversation. Sally, how do you feel about kicking us off with your pathway?
Tech, we love it, don't we? It's at times like that when the mute button is so handy. Hello, everyone. Christy, Baby, thanks so much to everybody, Emily, for having me join this forum today, and to everyone who's participating. I'm looking forward to getting a lot out of it as well. I know that I've got my 4 minutes allotted for this, so I'm going to gallop through those elements that are about my pathway to leadership. I've got 3 rules, and I use them still today, and they've developed through often through the mistakes and stumbles that I've had along the way, and they provide a guide for me. And they're very much firstly about taking responsibility for my own success. I think early on I used to wait, like many women do, for somebody else to notice how hard I was working or how brilliant I am, and then they would give me the opportunities I was dreaming about. And I had to learn in those early years that that was crap, and I was completely responsible for my own success, for my own picture of what happiness and success meant for me, and for really driving those outcomes. Because if I wasn't willing to take that responsibility for my own success, how could I expect other people to come along and help me or indeed drive my career for me? So my first 2 rules are about telling people what you want, and you have to find a style for doing that suits you. I found my style, and of course it's changed over time, but I have found ways of telling people what my dreams and aspirations are, or what I need in the short term to jump to new positions and opportunities. And secondly is to mitigate myself as a risk. Every time I want to leap, there are risks involved, and I need to take responsibility for mitigating those risks. We are told all the time, take risks as women, take risks. be the first, or do this way, make sure you're outside your comfort zone, all of those sorts of things. But to do that, it's really important that you identify what are the perceived risks as you step into those opportunities or you ask for them, and how do you make people confident and comfortable around you yourself, or get others to do it for you. And I'm happy to talk in more detail about that. My third one, of course, is then you need a network of supporters. The ones who will champion you when you're not in the room, the ones who know what opportunities you're searching for and will help you find them, and the people that will give you a reality check and tell you when you're being completely unreasonable or you're not trying hard enough even though you thought you were. Those are the people that you need around you and behind you, pushing you, pulling you and catching you. And early on I thought that was about quantity, and it's not. It's about quality. It's about the quality of relationships that you can build. So those three rules have really guided me on my pathway into leadership. A good sense of self-awareness and self-direction is terrific. And I have a motto that I use every day, sometimes more than once, and sometimes when it's sitting in a cubicle in the women's toilets, I say it over and over again, depending on what's happening outside. But it's this: I'm only one, but I am one. I cannot do everything, but I can do something. And I will not let what I cannot do interfere with what I can do. So get out there. Those things combined say a lot about my pathway in my career. Thanks, Christy.
Oh, thank you so much, Sally. What a great way to kick off. Yeah, I love this, so thank you so much. Cheryl, why don't you come in next? Would you like to share your pathway with us?
I will. I'll just take myself off. The classic thing now is remember when you're on mute. Thank you very much, Christy, and thank you for the invitation. And thank you. I can see many colleagues and people I don't know, so it's lovely to see you. I am the chair of the Board of Victorian Land Registry Services, which is the old Titles Office in Victoria. I'm chair of the Board of Waste Tech Engineering, and we proudly engineer products to enable the circular economy. I'm a board member of the Fisherman's Bend Development Board, as Sally well knows, and helps advise the Minister on the development of Fisherman's Bend. And finally, I am chair of the CRC for Water Sensitive Cities. I left EPA on the 30th of June and after nearly 11 years of service to the Victorian community. I was, prior to that, the chair of Melbourne Water. Before, though, my public service, I was in the waste industry, but in small family-run organisations right through to multinational companies. It was, though, when I was in my teens that I began my own leadership journey. And it began with my mother as a really significant role model for me. She built a family business, dog boarding kennels, but she was a pioneering woman pilot. She flew in air shows, she flew in close formation, and she actually set a speed record, excuse the dogs, she set a speed record between Brisbane and Melbourne, and that record, it was 1971, and that record still exists today, despite people, but despite people, many people trying to change that. Just one, I'm sorry about this. This is dog's out.
I think this is just the way that things go now. My puppy also tried to escape, so...
It is the way things go. And I thought it was going to be grandchildren, but it wasn't, it was the dogs. Look, it was in my years, though, at Melbourne Water, working with the incredible leader, Rob Skinner, who was managing director and I was chair, that a light bulb moment in leadership came to me. And it was around organisational culture and my role in shaping organisations around culture. And I came to term a phrase during those years, which is culture is the currency for delivery. And I still use that phrase most days now. And that I fundamentally believe that culture is created and nurtured from the top of an organisation, and it flourishes throughout the organisation given the right frameworks and conditions. And so organisational culture is very much a part of my leadership. It's part of my mission and the thing I do. And in those years in Melbourne Water, I've recognised that my role in the creation of a high-performing culture enables the organisation to be that, to be high-performing. And I recognise that my leadership, which I think I would term a values-based leadership, is fundamental to the success of my organisation. And it's a heavy responsibility and an accountability that I take very seriously to create an organisation where individuals can be the best that they can be. It's really important. On my resignation from EPA, I received hundreds of individual messages from my wonderful staff. And many of them actually referred to the first time they had met me at EPA induction. And I spoke at every induction. My message was always about culture, the culture we have, the culture we're totally creating at EPA every day. But I started by speaking about the importance of my family to me, that I was a daughter, a wife, a mum, a grandmother, simply a member of my family's clan. But when I came to work at EPA, it created the opportunity for me to have a career. And a career that allowed me to be the best that I could be in pursuit of that. So I talked about this being their opportunity to do the same thing. And I said that EPA would nurture and sponsor their career, and we would give them constructive feedback and support to be the best they could be. In addition, I always said, have a go, use your judgment. You've been selected for the roles based on your skills and experience. You will receive the training you need to use your judgment and that you will be the very best person to make that judgment. If we get it wrong, if you get it wrong, we'll unpick what the issues are together and we will resolve them. Most likely it'll be systemic issues. And the messages I received when I left EPA were overwhelming in that they spoke of that welcome and the warmth and the encouragement of my message, but also the subsequent success they had had at EPA. So my job at EPA was done. I very much feel that it's for my incredible former staff to lead that organisation into the future, but it was very much around the leadership of an organisation to become a high-performing organisation around culture. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Cheryl. Thank you. That's such an amazing journey, and I love that about the currency of culture. Sally, would you like? Sorry, Karen. Would you like to jump in now and share your journey with us?
Great, thank you very much, Christy, and thanks, Fabi, for inviting me today. I'm definitely in great company with Cheryl and Sally and Fabi, and you're going to hear some very consistent messages, I think, coming from me, as you've heard already from Cheryl and Sally, particularly around values-based leadership and just really, you know, having a go at things, and that's certainly what my leadership career is based on. I've been at Guide Dogs now for 9 years, a job, absolutely the best job in the world. Who doesn't love a puppy? But the work that we do is making a difference in the lives of thousands of people every year. I absolutely love it. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a sec. I also sit on the board of the Melbourne International Comedy Festival, Multiple Sclerosis Limited. I'm the co-founder of the Breast Cancer Network of Australia, the International Women's Forum, and another forum called #NotInMyWorkplace. I was asked also to give you a word regarding one word that defines leadership for me, and that is inclusiveness, and that incorporates into it transparency, which basically means, you know, one conversation that everyone's included in, and that's very, very important to me. In terms of my pathway to leadership, probably a bit like the others. You know, I started from fairly humble beginnings. I grew up in a small country town in South Australia. But what my parents really instilled in me right from a very early age was a very strong set of values to take me through my life and then ultimately through my career. And as a leader, I'm a very strong values-based leader. And the values of honesty, integrity, respect for others, and a strong work ethic were really embedded in me by my parents. And at Guide Dogs, we have a very strong values-based culture that absolutely underpins everything that we do. And all of our employees understand not only what our values are, but also what the behaviours are associated with those values and how they represent our brand in terms of representing Guide Dogs. And, you know, as part of that, we are the most trusted charity in Australia and have been for the last 7 years. So our values-based culture is very, very important. In terms of me as a leader, I guess I've always been a very high energy person. I don't really get tired that easily, funnily enough. And I don't suffer jet lag, which isn't really relevant at the moment, of course, but has certainly been very helpful throughout my career. I really do jump out of bed every day and with a spring in my step, and that's just who I am. And, you know, I really do think that life's too short not to bounce out of bed every day and be thrilled about what you're taking on. That said, I really do thrive on the enthusiasm of others. And so I make sure that I surround myself with really great people. And I've certainly done that at Guide Dogs and with, you know, my friends and my network. What you'll see very consistently is a high energy, really positive people and people that have diverse backgrounds, diverse opinions. That really keeps me interested and also inquisitive. I really hate a missed opportunity. So regardless of what stage I've been in my life, I've always grabbed the bull by the horns and just thought, let's have a go at this and see where it goes, even if I wasn't sure that I could actually do it. So to be honest with you, I don't think I've ever taken a job that I thought I could do or bought a house that I thought I could afford. But somehow we just always get there, don't we? I can see people nodding, yeah. So we get there somehow or other, right? I really have been fortunate enough to have some terrific career opportunities that have led me to where I am today. Started my career in banking and then globally in technology and business services. But, you know, I really do believe that everything that I've ever done in my career has led me to my role at Guide Dogs as the CEO of Guide Dogs Victoria, which is absolutely fantastic. And when I look at my career journey and my personal journey, there are really events that really stand out for me, and because I really do believe that they've pushed me to be the person that I am today. Some positive, some, you know, just challenging, but, you know, at the end of the day, I've learnt from them all. And these have also led to all the activities that I do outside of Guide Dogs as well, with boards and things that I do around initiatives for gender equity and that sort of thing. I really joined Guide Dogs at a very pivotal time in its evolution. It was really on its knees financially, and there was a real need to implement a radical transformational strategy that was capable of securing our future and repositioning us as a leader in the delivery of services. And you really only do that with a great team around you and once again with strong values. And it's been honestly an incredible ride from turning Guide Dogs really back from the brink to now being the most trusted charity in Australia for the last 7 years. And we have a really exciting future ahead of us. And one thing's for sure, Guide Dogs Victoria, Guide Dogs organisations generally really do take a piece of your heart that you never get back, and it's just such a privilege to do it. So really what I've seen with my team is a real spirit of courage, innovation, sound business practice, and we've really reinvented our organisation to build a sustainable future, but without losing the heart and soul of what our mission is, and that is supporting people who are blind or who have low vision. So in the process of doing all this, I think what we've done is we've developed a really strong resilience for pushing through difficult times. And boy, haven't we seen that in the last few months, and really had to adapt our business models to being able to cope with this whole new COVID world. So that's a little bit about my leadership journey so far. There's a lot in it.
Thank you, Karen. I'm really looking forward to hearing more about the experience that you've had in the past few months shortly. But I'm going to hand over now to Fabian, and I'd like to introduce Fabian into the conversation and to share a bit about her amazing pathway to leadership as well. You're on mute, Fabian.
Somebody had to do it, didn't they? I bet the others are really satisfied with me. Cheryl, Sally, Karen, Christy, just such an honour to be here to talk about what we're talking about today. I confess my first critical leadership role was at the age of 9, when at a school, Ivanhoe Girls Grammar in Melbourne, Victoria, I decided to stand up against the year 8 students who were taking the year 6 students' handstand wall. I was never particularly good at handstands, but I was very good at demanding our human rights and that they couldn't just invade and take our wall. And that year, a teacher wrote a report about me, which she gave to me many decades later, which said something like, Fabian's quite the orator. She's either going to be a criminal or a leader. And I'm awfully glad that I turned up on the right side of the law as an adult. I have a lot of things that have shaped me, and I would have to say first and foremost, the defining part of who I am is my family. And my family is in 3 parts. The first is this incredible family that I've come to be part of in the last 5 years, which is the international collective that is Homeward Bound. I can't even begin to tell you what an extraordinary collaboration it is, and that hearts that care about the visibility of collaborative, inclusive, legacy-minded leadership have just simply joined up around the planet and said it's time for change. And we need to do everything in our power to elevate the visibility, in particular, of women leading with a STEM background. It's time for fact-based decisions, not fiction. You're entitled to your beliefs. May you enjoy them and rest with them, but you're not entitled to your personal facts. Facts are facts, and science is not a perfect art, but it's the best we've got to inform our decisions. That's my most recent family. And in amongst that are my co-founders, Dr. Justine Shaw and Dr. Marianne Lee, both scientists who took a monumental leap of faith with a dream I had in 2015. I'm a social entrepreneur, and I managed to get the support of a lot of scientists who are rational, data-driven people to join an idea that came from a dream I had. My second family is my Dattner Group family, and that probably speaks a million things to what matters to me as a leader. You know, I don't take myself too seriously, and there's a little bit of me that is a bit of a pirate. And by that I mean, I'm not great at towing the line, and if you tell me to go left and you insist there's only one way to go and it's left, I will look meaningfully to the right and wonder why that way is closed to me, and want to go right simply because I was told I couldn't go right. I've tempered that somewhat as an adult, but I've come to know the power of real diversity in a team. I've come to know what it means to share your life with people who share the same purpose, much to Karen, Sally and Cheryl's perspective. If life is short, and I'll be very generous with you and assume the youngest amongst us is in their early 20s, 90 years from now, I probably hope you're all dead. I certainly hope I'm dead, because my boobs will be down around my feet and my bum will be down there with them, and my brain will be long gone. I think it's incredibly important that we acknowledge we are part of the river of life. And for me, the family, my working family, is just that. We are fellow voyagers. It's a very brave group of people in the Dattner Group. They're visionary. Like all of you, they've twisted things on a die and reinvented themselves through the pandemic. They've done so with love, determination, and a sense of belonging. It plays deeply to the values-based leadership that I believe in, but also, perhaps more importantly, purpose-based leadership. I describe myself as a leadership activist. I think the time for niceness around leadership is done. I think we should ask for more from leaders, and I think we should expect more from leaders. I think we're at a fork in the road, and to the left is some of the worst attributes of leadership that we have probably seen in our lives, manifesting in the behaviour of people who have the title of president but don't behave that way. On that side of the equation is threat and fear and division and rancor and isolation and unkindness and selfishness and bigotry. And I don't want to be part of that for my DG family and for my Homeward Bound family, for people I call friend, of whom many of you are here today. On the right-hand side, I believe there is a very different model of leadership, collaborative, inclusive, legacy-minded. And the telling question is, can we change to accommodate that style of leadership, which I hold to be common sense, but not common practice. And the third family I have, of course, is my family of origin. One of the members of my family is online tonight. Those are the people who give me joy, hold me up, give me love, play, are naughty with me, with whom I enjoy an abundant relationship of deeper quality, and who are irreplaceable in my life in so many ways. So family is everything. I'm a mother. And so what has happened for me, and now you're all included, is my definition of mother has expanded mightily. And I have a very big duty of care as a matriarch and as a leader to do everything in my power to contribute to the greater good. So as we progress, I will share a little bit of that philosophy with you. Part of it is making incredible mistakes on my journey, and I hope having the courage to learn from them. And that's been a big part of my most recent journey.
Thank you so much, Fabian, and welcome all 4 of you into this conversation. Now, I want to circle back to something that Karen said earlier. Karen, you said this sentence, which was, you want one conversation where everyone is included, and that's sticking with me, and I think we want to do that today. So I'm going to invite all of you into this conversation right now by using the chat function, and I'd really like all of you to please share what are the things that have contributed to your success in your leadership journey or your leadership pathway. Were there things in common with these 4 amazing women, or were there other things? So sharing in the chat. And while we're doing that, I'm going to keep you on the line, Fabi. I'm going to keep you here because you also said something around facts and science and linking into your Homeward Bound journey. And I'd like to bring you back into the conversation to share with us a little bit about the gender fact sheet and some of that data that you've seen that's emerging, that's supporting this conversation around having a different model of leadership. Now, I just want to also circle in, because I have the unfortunate job of keeping us on time, and we are a little late, so if we can keep this conversation really brief so we can go into experience, your current experience, that would be wonderful. So maybe like 2 minutes, Fabi, to talk to us about the data that's emerging.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm sure many people are familiar with it. And the second thing is we are going to circulate post this conversation, which is an evidence-based conversation, abundant information. We're not going to post it on the chat room because we think it doesn't respect the body of information that the speakers have. So we'll be giving you lots and lots of data about what we say. The first thing I will say is that up until January this year, the crisis in leadership was very apparent. Perhaps if you haven't seen it, go and see the Edelman Trust Barometer. And at that point in time, trust was plummeting in the extent to which leaders were thinking beyond themselves for the greater good and not just short-term in their thinking. The Edelman Group are just about to release an update on that post the pandemic, and Karen can probably talk more to this because we're about to get a sneak preview of it through her organisation, IWF, but it's changed through the pandemic. So 2 things have happened data-wise. The first is we had reached a crisis as of January this year globally. People did not trust their leaders anymore. When people don't trust, they will go for self-interest and divide. We are just waiting on an update which is suggesting that there's been quite a significant shift through the pandemic, which is going to show us regional data. Into this mix, however, there is continuing to be quite a horrific outcome for women. And I had you know that women's pay gap is on average 14% less money for the same work than men. Women appear to have done better during the pandemic. There was a recent test on some data that came out in May to validate whether in fact the countries we had claimed were doing well under female leadership were doing well. And it's not only stood up to deep interrogation, it's surfaced some very interesting information about what's being done incredibly well. So the emerging evidence is women can lead, but the emerging evidence is women are not being selected to leadership. For all the rhetoric, in Australia alone, it's estimated could be another 100 years before we have equity. The other piece you have to add in is we are in the middle of a global ecological crisis, not just a climate crisis, but the critical systems that sustain the planet are in the process of collapsing. The estimate by those who know, the UN, validated by some 36,000, 40,000 scientific peer reviews and 6,000 scientific edits, is that we have a decade, not 30, 40, 50 or 100 years, we have a decade to address the problems we've got. And I hold if you don't address leadership, you can't address the issues you've got.
Thank you so much, Fabian. Cheryl, I know you also are you're all over the evidence and the research. And did you want to share one of your favourite pieces of emerging research on why we need a new model of leadership?
Sure, Christy. I think what I'm thinking about is two things at the moment. One is that very recent studies have shown that the impact on women throughout the pandemic has been very significant. We're going backwards. And second was the research that Fabian mentioned, and that is that despite the fact that only 7% of the world has women leaders as part of their government, at head of their government, they have been outstanding leaders in flattening the curve. So the question for me is, given the impact on women of the pandemic, and as Fabian said, I'll share the data and the research that I've seen, and yet women have shown their incredible success as leaders. What do we need to change coming out of the pandemic? How do we promote the obvious leadership qualities of women, by the way, some of which have been absolutely heroic during pandemic? Holding down jobs, full-time jobs, homeschooling very young children, looking after families' mental health and well-being, and surviving themselves. And so what do we need to change? And we must change coming out of the pandemic. I think that the research that I like a lot is the McKell Institute discussion paper on the impact of COVID-19 on women and work in Victoria. And then on the other side, the fact that the Financial Women's Index talks about the progress towards economic equality for women in Australia has been wiped out by the coronavirus impact. And yet, on the other hand, we're seeing that in Forbes magazine reporting research, Financial Times reporting research, that women fund managers are doing better than their male counterparts. So I think we know that women can and should lead. The question of with the issues of being knocked back during the pandemic, what do we have to change urgently coming out of the pandemic to allow that to happen?
Thanks, Cheryl. And I love this language that you're saying, like what must change. And I think we'll have that, we're going to continue that conversation around what must change. But I'd like to circle back to Sally and bring you back into the conversation around what are you seeing that's changing now?
Thanks, Christy. Well, the pandemic, obviously, it's an enormous health crisis and it's also decimated economies around the world. But it has been a time of disconnect, and so many conundrums that previously had been too complex, too difficult, too costly have been not only addressed, but there have been triumphant outcomes. And one of those, certainly here in the city of Melbourne, has been around rough sleeping and homelessness. And it's been stellar in terms of the progress that's been made on an issue that had just been going on for way too long around our rough sleepers. And I think it's a good example of what we've just been talking about is some of the changes we've seen in leadership, or that have come to the fore during COVID, is very much that values-based leadership. There's been a moving away of egos and a focus on coordinating whatever anybody's got that's appropriate and coordinating it into a good response. So the proprietal nature, I should say, has moved aside, and it's just been, you know, what have we got that can make a difference, and we will contribute that. And then the other thing is still, I'm going to come back to it and call it out at the start in terms of how we progress women in leadership, and that is we need targets, we need quotas, we need whatever you want to call it. When we went into lockdown here in Melbourne and we looked at our rough sleeping population, we didn't say, oh, let's try and find safe accommodation for 10% of them or 50% of them. We said we've got to find safe accommodation, support services and meals for all of these people because they are the most vulnerable. And we set that target, and that's what we actually moved to with the coordinated efforts and with values-based leadership. That's what we need to see more of if we're going to move this issue along, which we've been talking about for my entire career, and progress has been incremental at best. The other thing I think that's interesting out of the data, that's certainly true in lots of different environments, but it was in stark relief, I guess, when I started here at Town Hall, is that we are in an environment where we can, I believe, more easily call out behaviours, structures, processes that become barriers or that are wrong, or that make people uncomfortable or are against people's values or belief. And a lot of the time, they're actually against those values, those culture values that are on the back of everybody's bathroom doors. I obviously spend a lot of time in our toilet cubicles here at Town Hall, but you know, we put them on posters and we put them on walls around our organisations, but are we actually living them? Now is the time. We've demonstrated in so many ways during COVID that we can do that. I mean, prioritising the health response as a starting point has been extraordinary. All of us here in Melbourne have effectively volunteered to be in lockdown for months now because we know that is the best health outcome for the entire community. We have done that, and that is extraordinary, and that's what we need to keep building on if we're going to make a difference on other conundrums that have faced us for a long time, and one of them is women in leadership. And why have women in leadership roles been successful during that time? Because of all the things I just talked about, because that tends to be the style of leadership. Focus on the issue and the outcome, not the who's doing it or whose idea was it or who's going to own it at the end. Set targets and really work as collaboratively towards them. And what we all need to do more of is be courageous to say what's wrong, what needs to be fixed, and what's not working.
Thank you, Sally. It really is a time of being more courageous, and that is something that we're seeing in the leaders that are doing really well. Karen, you're at the forefront of leadership and a female leader, and leading a lot of groups of women leading as well. What shifts are you seeing? Can you share with us what's happening, what you're seeing in shifts in leadership?
Look, I think what Sally has so well articulated is that crises like the one that we're facing today really are forcing businesses and their leaders to change and adapt at really extraordinary speed and think very, very differently, which women leaders are very adept at, and they have natural instincts associated with, thinking on the go and thinking about the bigger picture. But it's that EQ level thinking also that's got to come into play here, and that traditional hierarchical leadership model has really got to be pushed to the side. And I think those leaders that can really filter out the noise and focus on what truly drives success. And what we have a term, a value at Guide Dogs, which is lead with head and heart, and the balancing of those head and heart decisions will really ensure that organisations that can do that emerge stronger than they've ever been. And when I say that, leading with the head is about providing a very, very clear vision for the future and the priorities that are required to ensure your success. and then, you know, and as part of that apply fact-based decision making. But then that's got to be balanced with the heart, which is about inspiring and empowering and trusting employees. And I think what we've been able to demonstrate and build over the course of the last 6 months very well is that we've demonstrated that we can be trusted. I think our employees have demonstrated that they can be trusted as leaders in communicating with our teams and being open about what the future holds, and the hard decisions that we've had to make has demonstrated that as leaders we can be trusted. So, you know, we need to acknowledge that, and we need to now extend that responsibility and make, you know, our teams be part of the change that we all want to see. So, you know, we're seeing at Guide Dogs a very, very different dynamic around how we're leading the organisation, but importantly, how we're delivering services to people who are blind or have low vision, who in an ordinary situation would feel somewhat marginalised. And when you add COVID and all of the restrictions that go with that around that, you know, it just adds a whole new level of you know, complexity to the equation. So once again, what I'm seeing, and you know, I'm part of an amazing organisation called the International Women's Forum, and this has been a really strong topic of discussion around how we, you know, bring in that very strong EQ level leadership skill balanced with, you know, the fact-based decision making around how we're going to change the way we operate our businesses and take our teams with us.
Well, thank you, Karen. And I you know what, Cheryl, I'm going to bring you into the conversation in 1 second. Do you mind if I just also launch a poll at the same time? So what I'd like to do is, Cheryl, I'll give you a chance to come into that conversation and respond, and Fabian as well. But at the same time, I'd like to bring everybody into the conversation, and this is where we're going to be using our live polling. So if you can get your phones ready while I share my screen with you, and you will be taking a photo of the QR code as soon as that is live. So I'm going to bring this up for you now. So you can see now there's this question that we'd like to bring you all into the conversation. So based on your experience of the past year of bushfires, of COVID, of social uprising, of an economic downturn, or you name it, we've had it, what leadership traits do we now need the most? And you heard a lot of them from Karen. EQ, we heard courage, we heard having different priorities, filtering out the noise. The poll will become live now at the moment. If you would like to add in what traits you think we need the most to that conversation, and you can see that you can also upvote. You can just skip, you don't have to add your name in. And of course, if you did add your name in, we don't see it. It's a completely anonymous poll, and we won't be sharing any of your data. Now, please start voting on each other's as well, so we can have a bit of a trend and see what you see are the most valuable. But while we're doing that, Cheryl, please come back into the conversation.
Thank you. Actually, many of the things I was going to say are now being listed. I think what I've seen, and in my own family, but also more broadly with women, is in the last 6 months since COVID lockdowns, is courage. You know, as Sally said, effectively this is a huge voluntary, it has some rules behind it, but we are in lockdown because we want to protect each other. And so I think that has taken courage, but I'm also seeing an enormous amount of collaboration happening for us to survive this period. And I think courage, collaboration, and also the way values have emerged as being absolutely critical. We're doing what we're doing because of the community that we both live in, respect and trust, and because we want to protect others, not necessarily even within our own families. And so my view is that courage, collaboration and values are traits now that are on display in absolute abundance. And I think we need to take them through.
Baby, would you like to maybe also add in your top three, or comment on what you're seeing now on the live polling? You're on mute, Fabi. Fabian, we still can't hear you. It's okay.
Sorry, my apologies, I've got two screens going. I think the thing that I want to, I put a bit of truth serum on the table from my perspective as somebody who's a lifetime obsessed with the practice of leadership, and I'm now working in many, many different countries and with many different levels of leadership in those countries. And I think we know that collaboration is important. We know inclusion is important. We know trust and courage are important. But the fact is, it's not what most people experience in leadership. And I am very now committed to saying it's common sense. Those values are common sense, but they're not common practice. They're just not common practice. I have abundant friends that I care greatly about in China. I have friends in Russia. And I have, of course, family and friends in America. America is brutally divided. One half doesn't trust the other, absolutely. And it seems like it's slipping inevitably, horrifically, towards the probability, if not possibility, of a civil war. It's incomprehensible in our lifetimes that the things we have taken for granted are crumbling. Trust is very hard won. It is built on vulnerability, our ability to have conversations where we trust that you will listen and you will respond in a way that helps me speak. That's not what's happening in organisations. That's just not what leaders are creating in large part. And then there are amazing women. And then there are amazing men and women doing the right thing. And if you've ever seen the bell curve on change, which I'm sure many of you have, what we're watching at the moment is the leading edge of transformation. And nobody follows the crazy. It's the next 10 to 15% that everybody follows. We have to win that 10 to 15% of people globally, not just to saying these things are important, but fighting for them. So we have to ask for more from leaders. We have to expect more from leaders. And I think the time has come to challenge not individuals, but the actual practice of leadership. We don't recruit based on demonstrable behaviours associated with collaboration, inclusion, or legacy mindset. We recruit on personal achievement, financial acumen, business acumen, operational and logistics acumen, and then incidentally, we do a bit of a values check at the end of it. That's not the people on this call, but it's a very large part of our global society. And so for me, these things matter, and I see pockets of it, but I also see a world that is perilously at risk of dividing itself between the haves and the have-nots. So for instance, to hear Sally's story about the collaboration to see those sleeping rough in homes during COVID, I go, that's the sort of transformational change we should be shouting about from the rooftops, because it says with the right intention, we do the right thing. The challenge for us all is that we might be challenged by something far bigger than the COVID virus.
Fabi, I think that's actually a really nice segue into the last question. We're already at 3:19, and so I think a really nice way to sum up this conversation that we're having and to hear from you all again once more is to share a statement that I read in Julia Gillard's new book. And she says, her new book on women and leadership. I don't know if anybody's read it, so it's really, yeah, I've got lots of us have read it. It's really great. And she says the case for a new model of leadership is a moral one. And I think, Fabi, you just started that conversation with us. So if I open the question up to any of you to answer that question, what are your thoughts on that statement?
I'll have a go, Christy. I think Gillard also said that there are immoral barriers to achieving leadership. Things about judgment about women's hair, body shape, personal appearance, not the same as men. The conundrum that they say is being, you're a bit of a bitch, is language that they use. Loaded language that I think I've certainly experienced in the workplace as well. And the other conundrum of, if you're here, who's looking after your family? And if you don't have one, why not? But I think the things that are really important, they're deep moral imperatives that they talk about is, I completely agree with holding true to yourself and your values throughout your leadership journey. Be the leader you are, not what someone else wants you to be. And I think that's really important. We are our own selves, not someone else. And role model the positive. And you've heard from Sally today around how, you know, she talked about the positives of COVID. So role modeling the positives. And the other thing that we're doing here today is creating networks, growing networks, helping other women up the ladders. And I've heard Christine Nixon, former police commissioner, once say, there are the women who help others up the ladders, and there are the women who pull up the ladders behind them. And I think it's absolutely imperative in this leadership journey we're all taking that we help others rung by rung up those ladders.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you, Cheryl. And I think one of the things that we've got to really take into account with all of this is that people are looking for very clear direction, a really clear, safe, you know, pathway towards the future. And we've got to also take into account the fact that people travel that path at very different rates. And we do need to take into account the fact that people don't get on board with a lot of thinking as quickly as others, or they've got other challenges. And, you know, Cheryl quite rightly points out, we're all juggling multiple lives, right? And so therefore, and we're good at it. We're really good at it. So, but equally as a leader, I think we've got to be very flexible in our thinking around remembering that, you know, our employees are not with us for an 8-hour day. You know, there are so many other aspects of their life that we need to consider in terms of how we lead, how we treat them, how flexible we are, and how we create a working environment, working life that accommodates the different lives that all of our people are leading.
Gosh, to add in here, I'm struggling in a way. I've got that book by Julia by my bed and I've got to read it. I'm struggling a little bit with the quote. I'm sure there's context around it because it is a moral one, but it's an economic one and it's an international. There are just so many dimensions to why there's so many dimensions to leadership. So let me go back a step. It used to be when I started my career that it was what I call leadership by numbers, you know, like paint by numbers. You got told to put these colours in these boxes. Well, leadership was the same. You got told you had to do these things and then you became a leader. And most of the things you had to do weren't easily available or accessible by women and, you know, became a self-perpetuating thing. We also got told when I was younger that, you know, this is the pathway to success. Here's this, and to use Cheryl's words, you know, here's a ladder and these are the rungs you must take. And I've found, and I think what this crisis demonstrates, is that it's nothing like that. There are no straight lines in life. There are no paint by numbers anymore. That leadership has so many elements to it. And frankly, we don't want everybody to be the same type of leader. We want leaders to come forward and work together based on different strengths. And I think there's a lot about the way that women lead that, just to generalise, which is always dangerous, which is more collaborative. And I think that's why we end up with better results, better listening, responding, action. Those sorts of things are terrific. But there's no doubt we're going to have to do this together. It's not an either or, it's an and. And this sense of morality is right. I think it's been, you know, morality has been part of it for a long time, but because of paint by numbers and that constraint, you know, I still talk to a lot of kids at university in their penultimate year and they're all caught up in a straitjacket on what success looks like. And I literally stand on stage doing a star jump like this and saying, test the boundaries, test yours, test the systems, test the worlds. And we actually need more of that in our leadership, because this constrained thinking and limiting to, you know, sort of one-dimensional conversations is never going to get us there. And this crisis, I've had to pull on every single element of my experience of who I am as a person and of my support network to get myself, my organisation and the broader stakeholders to even this point, and we haven't even finished yet. So, you know, without drawing across all of those things, yeah, I think in the crisis, there is no rule book, and the paint by numbers certainly goes out the door. But I'd say that we need to accept more of that as we move forward.
Thank you, Sally. And Fabian, I'm going to offer you the last 3 minutes, but do you mind if we do a poll at the same time? Fantastic. So Victoria actually added in the chat, she said that we also need to be strategic. It's a moral one, but it's also a strategic one. And so for the last part, I thought it might be interesting to talk about what actions can we individually take to advance this new model of leadership. And I'm going to launch a poll again. And then Fabian, as I'm doing that, actually from now, I'd like to invite you back into the conversation before we give me 1 minute to wrap up at the end.
Yeah. A couple of things I think are really important. When you're in the thick of a paradigm, you think the paradigm is the truth, that it is your universe. And it's just a paradigm. It's a set of rules that you live within. And I think that the prescription for leadership that got us to where we are today is not the prescription we need going forward. And I do believe, as with Sally, that it's not an either or, it's an and, it's us, it's the collective, it's men and women and children, it's all ages, all genders, all preferences, it's all colour, all creed, all religion. That's common sense. And again, I'm going to say it's not common practice. So when a pendulum has swung in one direction, it doesn't swing to the middle. It has to do some balancing. And I'm of the opinion right now, the reason why I advocate, having spent the greater part of my life working with men and women, I now advocate almost exclusively for women for one simple reason. Women don't know themselves. They don't believe in themselves. They don't see that they are necessarily a solution. They doubt themselves. They question their choices. They worry about whether they're worthy of love, if they're going to be approved of in the choices that they make. And they can sometimes overcompensate by becoming too attached to getting things right and being perfect and competing in a world that they do not at the moment fully understand. So ironically, I want to put this to everyone, including our very wonderful speakers. Everything that we are criticised for, that's my dog now. It's a dog moment for all of us. We begin and end in the same way. Everything that women are criticised for, I believe, is our greatest asset. The fact that we think in the round, that we are inclusive and don't define ourselves by one aspect of our lives is our saving grace. That we are vulnerable, that we do doubt ourselves is our saving grace. That we can be self-critical makes us listen more effectively, helps us include more people towards a shared conclusion. And therein lies a problem for us all, and that is the current model of leadership is about identifying talent and promoting it. What if that whole model is horribly wrong? It's horribly wrong. And all our organisational succession plans are built around that premise, that leaders are good at identifying talent, nurturing it, growing it, and putting it up into leadership roles. What if that's wrong? That's just wrong. Talent will never again be vested in an individual. It's a collective action. There will be pockets of individual genius, but I think this world needs us together. And I think that is the asset that women bring to the table. Our doubt is a fuel for our greatness. It will cause us to include people and to recognise the difference around us. For a very, very long time, leadership has prized individual excellence, and we've followed the leader. I don't think that's a model that will take us forward. I think the leader needs to sit in the centre of a series of concentric circles. And at one moment in time, I may take the lead, and then I will devolve into a followership, and then Sally will take the lead, and then Kath Mainland will take the lead, and then Michelle Crouch, and then Joe McBain, and David Forshaw. Slowly this will emerge around our planet, and that will mirror how our brains operate, which is that at any one time, the whole brain should be working for us. It isn't. And pockets influence how we function. Different model of leadership for the times we live in. Collaborative, inclusive, legacy-minded, trusted with assets. And the assets are people and money. Changing the game, changing the rule.
Thank you, Fabian. And I'm actually going to take the lead right now because unfortunately we're already at 3:31. And so I'd like to, first of all, yes, a huge round of applause to our panelists. Thank you so much for today. Standing ovation from me. Oops, you can see I'm not wearing my work pants, but my exercise pants. That's another Zoom thing. I'd also like to really thank Dapna Grant for hosting this and the amazing tech team and all the work that's happened behind, because without Dapna Grant, the conversation today wouldn't have happened. And of course, all of you for joining us today and being part of this one conversation. So thank you very much. We're sending out all of the data and all of the links to you via email. Please stay in contact with us if you have any questions. Enjoy your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christy. Thank you for a beautiful piece of emceeing.